Good morning.
Good morning.
Everybody well?
Yeah.
Good to see you all, and good to see you guys on Zoom as well. Sorry you can't be here in the flesh, but we are happy that you have joined with us anyway. I am excited as we start this new sermon series about relationships. The guy goes into the local supermarket and he's at the checkout and he's got a bottle of wine in one hand and a bouquet of flowers on the other. And he puts them next to the till and he says to the waiter at the till, "But I'll be back in a minute." So he runs away. Have you ever had that happening when you're in line? People run away to get someone else. He runs away, he comes back, only to have another bottle of wine in his hand and another bouquet of flowers. And so the lady at the till just smiled and said, "I guess you've got two girlfriends." He says, no, just one really angry one. We all need relationships in our lives. We all need relationships with our families, our friends, our neighbours, our country, our spiritual family, the world, God. Everybody needs relationships in their lives. Some of those are good and healthy for us, whereas others are not so healthy for us. But we all need them. And we all have relationships in our lives. And they're such a blessing from God to have these relationships. Like I said, we're beginning a new sermon series on the theme of relationships. And over the next 5 weeks, we're going to look at our relationship with sin. We're going to look at our relationship with our physical family, our relationship with each other, our spiritual family. And then finally, we'll kind of wrap it all together and look at our relationship with God and see how God is the one who brings it all together. Today, we're going to look at our relationship with creation. So, when God created Adam, he created a beautiful paradise for him to live in. Back in chapter 1, we get a description of it here. It says, "The Lord God made all kinds of trees out of the ground, trees that were pleasing to the eye and good for food. In the middle of the garden were the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. A river watering the garden flowed from Eden. From there it was separated 4 headwaters. The name of the first was Pishon. It winds through the entire land of Havilah, where there is gold. The gold of that land is good. Aromatic resin and oxen are there also. The name of the second river is Gihon. It winds through the entire land of Cush. The name of the third river is the Tigris. It runs along the coast, along the east side of Asher, and the fourth river is the Euphrates." And these rivers, except one, are very much still in existence today, aren't they? You still see them today. But you can imagine, if you wish, Adam being in this garden. Put yourself in Adam's shoes. If you've never seen anything about creation before, imagine you're there and you're walking through and you see all these beautiful trees. They just look absolutely awesome. Something you've never seen before. And as he starts to walk through the middle of the garden, he sees these 2 other trees. But maybe they look different. Maybe they smell different. But there's maybe something different about these 2 trees than all the other trees that are around. Can you imagine Adam's taste buds when he bites into that first fruit, whatever it was? Can you imagine the taste buds coming to life? Because you've never tasted anything like that before? Or that juice that's just pouring from them? And we can almost imagine them sitting next to the rivers, enjoying a cool drink from the river. And I don't know about you, but sitting next to running water I find very therapeutic. We have a little water feature in our back garden. It doesn't make a lot of noise, but the noise you hear it is just so soothing. But we can imagine Adam not only drinking the water, but sitting next to it and just listening to the water as it runs through the whole land. We could imagine him listening and feeling the cool, gentle breeze on that hot day. Imagine his smell. As he smells the aroma coming from the resin and the onyx. I mean, this is a sensory overload, isn't it? The eyes, the ears, the taste, and the smell. And this is just wonderful. This is indeed paradise on earth. And so when God created Adam, you'll notice that that very garden that God created, he put Adam to work in it. Why? Why did he put Adam to work in it? Well, simply because he wanted Adam to learn the value of physical exercise. He wanted him to learn to take responsibility for taking care of his own physical needs. Now, you may not think this, okay? But physical exercise is actually good for us. So they tell us. Yeah? My exercise is on the golf course. That's about the limit of my exercise, or walking up and down stairs. But we also learn something else from this. The principle, if you don't work, you won't eat. That's why Adam had to take care of the garden, because if he doesn't, he's not going to reap a harvest from any of the food that's been there. And he would end up starving. So this garden that God created is absolutely paradise. Let me show you a garden that maybe isn't so great to look at. Adam, remember, had to work in the garden, he had to take care of it. And when you imagine a garden where nobody's looking after it, okay? And we find this in Proverbs. Solomon, he says, I passed by the field of a sluggard. Sluggard is another word for a lazy person, okay? By the vineyard of a man lacking sense. And behold, it was all overgrown with thorns. The ground was covered with nettles, and its stone wall was broken down. Then I saw and considered it. I looked and received instruction. A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the arms to rest. And poverty will come upon you like a robber, and want like an armed man. Imagine you're Solomon, and you're walking by this vineyard. Yeah? You're walking by, and you just look over, and you say to yourself, this is an absolute mess. It's a mess. It's overgrown with thorns. There's nettles all over the place, all over the ground. The stone walls that were built to protect the vineyard are on the ground and just in pieces. And so it's not fit for purpose. Why is this garden such a mess? Because the owner refused to work in it. He refused to take care of it. They're too lazy. They would rather, they're more interested in sleeping and relaxing and chilling out, as we'd say today. They're more interested in doing that. And so their vine isn't going to produce any grapes anytime soon. And as a result, poverty is going to come. And so again, we're reminded of the principle from Adam that if a person doesn't work, they won't eat. Remember what Paul says to the church in Thessalonica? He says, if anyone is not willing to work, let him not eat. You see, God created Adam to work in that garden and take care of that garden, and God still demands that we work today. Somebody once said this: God gives the birds their food, but he doesn't throw it into their nests. You understand the principle? You know, we're living in a system where we're blessed with a great, a benefit system. Back in Bible times, there was no benefit system. If you didn't work, you starved to death. Now, there's nothing wrong with the benefit system. David Lloyd George, I think, was the guy who introduced it, Prime Minister from Wales originally, but he introduced the benefit system. But the benefit system today, I'm sad to say, has been abused. And it's been abused in many ways. Now, I understand that people can't work for various different reasons, okay? Maybe physical or mental health or whatever, they can't work. I get that, I understand that, and these people should be helped. But there's also a bunch of people who do nothing, who are not interested in work. We know people exactly like that. When you talk to them about, there's jobs going here, there's jobs going there. Oh, it's not for me, it's not my type of job, it's not for me, it's not my type of job. But yet at the same time, they're willing to work on the side and take some cash in hand while still claiming those benefits. The principle is the same. We can't expect people to get fed if they're not willing to do something to help themselves. That's the whole point. God gives the birds their food, but he doesn't throw it in their nests. We're living in a society where the government is just chucking money at people. They want the food in the nest. When God created Adam, he brought all the animals to Adam. Why? Well, because he wanted Adam to name the animals and learn the value of mental exercise. Now, if God wants Adam to name the animals, what does that tell us? That tells us that Adam was able to speak. God blessed man with the ability to communicate, to talk. And so, if God created Adam strong enough to work in the garden, he also created him with the ability to think for himself, to communicate with others. And imagine the scene, okay? Imagine you're there, you're Adam for the first time. You've never seen anything, right? You're there for the first time. Imagine that this large-looking creature with big ears, is coming towards you. It's got a long nose and it's got two big tusks coming out of it. And Adam looks at it and he studies it and he says, you know what? I'm going to call this an elephant. Where did that come from? Where did that word come from? Or imagine, he's out and about somewhere and these tiny little creatures are walking around the ground, and they're all over the ground and maybe one or two starts to crawl up his leg. And he picks these things up and he looks at it and he studies it and he thinks, you know what, I'm going to call this an ant. Can you imagine the fun that Adam must have had with this? With creating all these different animals. You see, giving a name to someone or something was understood in ancient times to be an exercise of authority. Did you know that? Yeah. Remember, when Adam gave names to the birds and the animals, he was exercising the authority that God gave him to rule over all the living things. We see in the text we read that Adam called Eve woman, but later he's going to call her Eve. Why? Because he's exercising that authority over her. That's where we get the subjection thing coming in. You do that with your kids, don't you? Well, I hope you do. Most people have got children and they've got names, haven't they? Why did you give them names? Because it's a beautiful name, yes. But it's also an exercise to show you've got authority over them. You've got pets at home. You name your pets. It's the same principle. You name them because you give authority over those animals. And so much hasn't really changed from back here. And so, the evolutionists, they come along and they tell us that we're simply animals and we evolve from animals. That's what they teach and they have taught for many, many years. But this text tells us that not only is man superior to all the other living creatures, but also shows us the great gulf between man and the living creatures is emphasised and endorsed by God because God assigned Adam dominion over all living creatures. And so Adam has to learn to use his brain. He has to learn to think and speak. But he also needs to know just how special he was. See, when we go down the evolutionist route and thinking, well, I'm just from an animal, you're nothing special, are you? But you see what happened with God and Adam was different. Remember, God said that it wasn't good for Adam to be on his own. He said, I'm going to make a helper suitable for him. And then after bringing all the animals to Adam to name, Adam still didn't have a suitable helper. Did God know this? Of course he did. Of course God knew that he wouldn't find a suitable helper with the animals. But this wasn't for God's benefit. This was for Adam's benefit. He now knows that he was completely different from the animals and he was a special creation. You see, God is teaching Adam that he is different from all the animals. Way different from them. And so when God created Adam, He created Eve from Adam, and he brought her to him. Now, remember the text here, the one we read, the Lord God made a woman from the rib. Yeah, he was taking it from the man. That word rib is totally misleading, okay? That makes it sound like he took a bit of rib out and that was it. No, in the actual text, the Hebrew text says that God took a shank, a whole chunk out of Adam's side as Adam slept in anesthesia, if you want to call it whatever it is. God put him to sleep. And so he brought him from the side, not from the bottom. He didn't take Eve from his head, but from his side. And so this is when God created them both, they were equal. They were there for each other. And so he created Eve and he brings her to Adam. Why? Because he wants Adam to learn the value of having emotions. Now, imagine again, I know we're using a lot of our imagination this morning, but sometimes it's the only way to get into the text. Imagine you are Eve, and you've been brought to Adam. Can you imagine looking at Adam, and Adam looks at you? Imagine the eyes just widening up. Imagine the joy in his heart as he finally has somebody that he can not only speak to, but somebody that looks kind of like him. Can you imagine that? We can almost feel the emotion in Adam's words as he more or less says, wow, she's beautiful. She's gorgeous. She's perfect. Listen to how Solomon describes his wife. He says, how beautiful you are, my darling. Oh, how beautiful. Your eyes behind your veil are like doves. Your hair is like a flock of goats descending from the hill of Gilead. Your teeth are like a flock of sheep just shorn, coming up from the washing. Each has its twin. Not one of them is alone. Your lips are like a scarlet ribbon. Your mouth is lovely. Your temples behind your veil are like the halves of a pomegranate. Your neck is like the Tower of David, built with courses of stone. On it hang 1,000 shields, all of them shields of warriors. Your breasts are like two forms, like twin forms of a gazelle that browse among the lilies. Now, like we've been studying quite a lot lately, this is foreign language to us. But it's basically a beautiful love song, where Solomon is describing his wife in the way that they would describe them back then. You know, to us, this would be an insult to some women today, yeah? But back then, it meant a whole different thing. And so just as nothing could wow Solomon like his wife did, nothing could wow Adam like Eve did. She captured his attention and made him feel special. Oh, don't get me wrong, I'm sure that Adam loved hanging out with the animals. I'm sure he enjoyed that. But Eve made them feel emotionally complete. Eve made them feel whole. I remember speaking with Frank Worgan one time, and he was talking about when Isabel was in hospital, and he was at the bedside with Isabel, and as he was getting up to go, he said to the nurse, look after her for me, there's a bit of me lying in that bed. And Isabel turned round and said, half, dear, half. And isn't that so true? Isn't that so true? Together, God never created anything without giving it a purpose. In the beginning, Adam's purpose was to cultivate and take care of that garden, and Eve's job was to help him do that. But they're now able to fulfill God's ultimate purpose for them. They're now husband and wife. Here we're introduced to the first marriage in the Bible, like Genesis tells us. The word Genesis means beginnings. It's the first of everything, if you wish. And so they're now husband and wife. And they have to go out and have children and fill the earth with children. You see, God created us to work. He created us to think and use our brains, and He created us with the ability to feel emotions. Why? Because our relationship with creation helps us understand our relationship with the Creator. It was God who created the garden and put Adam to work in it and take care of it. And Adam did it. Why? Because he loved and trusted God to take care of him. It was about obedience. It was God who created the animals and brought them to animal to name them. And Adam did that. Why? Because he loved and trusted God to take care of him. It was all about obedience. It was God who created the woman and brought her to Adam. He gave her a name. Why? Because he loved and trusted God to take care of her. It was all about obedience. In other words, a relationship with God is one of trust and obedience. Let me finish by saying this. Arabian horses are trained rigorously in the Middle Eastern deserts. The horses must learn to fully obey their teachers. And so this obedience is tested by depriving the horses of water for many days and then turning them loose near water. And as the horses get to the water edge, and just before they drink as much water as they need, the trainer blows his whistle. If the horses have learned to obey them, they will turn and they'll go back to their trainer, who then gives them all the water they need. You see, the trainer knows what the horses need. And he won't allow them to die of thirst. But they must first learn to trust him. God created the garden, the animals, and Eve because God knew what Adam needed. But he also created all these things to teach Adam the importance of obedience. He wants Adam to learn that he can trust God. And he could trust God to take care of his needs. Now, what about you today? You're thinking, well, you know, God, I've got a whole bunch of needs. Well, you know what? God knows what you need. He knows. He knows better than you do. God doesn't promise to meet our greeds, but our needs. He knows what you need, and he's willing to give it to you, but you must learn to trust and obey him first. And how do we go about doing that? We go about doing that by seeking first his kingdom and his righteousness. And God says, you know what? You leave everything else to me. I'll take care of you. You put me number one in your life, and I'll take care of you. And so we demonstrate our trust and obedience to God by putting our faith in him and putting God first in our lives. God bless you.